Hi everyone, good to see you. Jarrell here. I used to live in Raccoon City until the late 90s when the place really went downhill. So today I wanted to talk about Resident Evil Death Island, which is by far the best Resident Evil movie they've made, but it's not very good. None of the Resident Evil movies are very good. They're all pretty awful. And I'm specifically talking about the CGI films made by, or they're sanctioned by Capcom, that are supposedly part of the Resident Evil lore. So these are the CGI films, and over the years they've been getting better and better in terms of visuals. They started out looking very much like a cutscene out of a PlayStation 2 game, and that's totally fine. As a Resident Evil fan, you just want more of what you like. The live-action films, take them or leave them. I watched them and I just had to force myself at gunpoint to watch the live-action Resident Evils, but the CGI films, much more enjoyable than the live-action films, but they're all quite terrible in basically the exact same way. So I want to talk about Death Island because it's easily the best one. But the story for every single CGI Resident Evil film goes like this. I could write one. I could write one in about 10 minutes. You know what? I'll do it now. Just off the top of my head, I hadn't planned this, but I'll write a new Resident Evil movie. We're going to call it Resident Evil Isolation. There we go. This is the next Resident Evil film. Leon Kennedy is investigating some mission. He's sent on a mission, and he's, not expecting it to be anything big. And then, at the same time, we see Chris Redfield is sort of sulking, and he's on some angry mission. And then all of a sudden, for some inexplicable reason, using imagery that calls back to some previous game, there's a zombie, and Chris is shocked for some reason. And then he has to fight some zombies, and he struggles with it for a while because who knows why. He's killed thousands of these things, but he struggles killing it. And then at the last second, he's a big, strong man, and then he easily kills this zombie. And then we watch Leon Kennedy a little bit, and then for some reason it turns out that he's chasing some mystery, unhinged villain who is very quirky and weird and unhinged and has some interesting gimmick. And then a big, strong woman comes out and kicks Leon's butt for some reason. Is a woman in some sort of... It's not Ada Wong, but for some reason some woman mysteriously is able to defeat Leon while Leon's chasing after this villain. And then for some reason we're gonna see Jill. Jill's here now, and then Chris is going to have some sort of heart-to-heart with Jill that doesn't seem to line up with anything in the games. And then they go on a mission, and then they're shooting zombies again for some reason. They get separated, and then Chris and Jill are now separated. Chris is in a tough spot. Leon shows up out of nowhere and then saves Chris, and then they argue for some inexplicable reason, because they've known each other for years and they would have obviously ironed things out, but for some reason, they're disagreeing about something, and Chris goes, "Whoa, Leon, what are you doing here?" And then Leon goes, "What are you doing here?" And then they have their gruff thing going on, and then for some reason one of them gets infected. And then so they get sidelined and benched, and then the main villain shows up, and he's going to spend about 15 minutes explaining his plan, and he's laughing. And then inexplicably Rebecca Chambers shows up. She's got a vaccine, and then the bad guy reveals that something very bad happened to him, and it's very sad, and now he's gonna reset the world. This virus will equalize everything, and the rich will no longer be rich, and the poor will no longer be poor. My poor Maria was killed. And then the villain releases his whole thing. Let's go ahead and bring Rebecca in, and then she uses the vaccine. They shoot the bad guy. He falls off of something, and he's like, "Ah!" And then he injects himself with the virus, turns into a big explodey thing. And then, you know what, for some reason, let's throw in another fan favorite. We have not seen Barry. We haven't seen Barry in a long time. Every movie should introduce a new gimmick character, so Barry shows up. Whoop-de-doo. Whoa. And then for the last 15 minutes, let's just do callbacks, and then we can sort of show the audience, remember this? Remember when the character said this in one of the games? Remember when the character did that? Remember when the character You know, and then there's going to be a bunch of out of context odd things where Jill has, you know, a gun that she used in Resident Evil 3, and she sort of winks at the audience, and Chris will say something like, "What's that? Whoa!" And then Jill will be like, "It's a this thing. Remember this thing?" And then for some reason, inexplicably, Leon's hair is perfect the whole time. He gets to do some backflips. He's doing a lot of hand-to-hand and kicking. The camera does that thing where it looks like it's a QuickTime event where the character is running towards the camera and they're doing parkour over a bunch of debris as some sort of large villain. The main villain is chasing after them. Rebecca gets to shoot a gun like twice, but then they sideline her again to do some stupid computer thing because Rebecca's not allowed to be the action hero that she was in 2 of the stories of Resident Evil. So they make her be a computer nerd. She uses something, and then all of a sudden the main villain is immobilized enough for all of the characters to inexplicably have rocket launchers, and then they all blow up the main villain. And then that's the end of it. Oh, don't forget that we need to introduce a couple side characters that are basically blocks of wood and black holes of charisma. They don't actually have any real connection to our characters that we care about. They don't really have a connection to the plot, but they are there. Maybe they help a little bit, but then they end up dying. Also, there's going to be, you know, someone that has connection to the villain that ends up dying during the story as well. And that's it. That's every single CGI Resident. That's Resident Evil Isolation. There we go. All we need to do is just pick a location that Resident Evil hasn't used yet. Antarctica. There we go. Resident Evil Isolation is set in Antarctica, and the gimmick of this movie is that Barry gets to be in it. That's every single Resident Evil CGI movie. Now, I'm not venting or ranting in a negative way, because I've enjoyed all of them. I've recently rewatched Vendetta last night, and I watched Death Island 2 days ago, and I'm going to go ahead and rewatch the other CGI movies. I enjoy them. They're awful. They're terrible. They're all exactly the same. So what was interesting about Death Island is it's visually so much worse. And I had a friend over, and he's in his late 70s. He walked past the living room when I was watching Death Island, and he said, "Oh, what game are you playing?" And I said, "What?" And he goes, "What game is that?" And I said, "No, this is a movie." And he goes, "Huh, really? Okay." And it looks, here's the thing, right? I felt like they rendered Death Island using Unreal in real time, because the animations were very wonky. Characters would stand around in their idle position until it was their turn to deliver a line, and then suddenly, like, the animation logic would take effect, and then their head would move around like this, and then it feels like it's disconnected from their body while they're delivering their line. And then there's this going on. And it was charming because it reminded me of the original Resident Evil and Resident Evil 2, where characters would talk, and it would sort of look like this. And I kind of like Death Island from that respect. I don't know if they were doing that on purpose, making the movie look like it was a video game, but it was off-putting because Vendetta, which comes before Death Island, Vendetta is gorgeous. The character animations are great. The mouths barely move when the characters are talking, which is a little off-putting. And I don't understand why the characters do that. And it's like they all have a lockjaw or something, and then they can't really move their mouths. But that's just how the animation is, I guess. It must be difficult to sync it up to multiple languages and everything like that. But that's just how Vendetta looked. But in Death Island, it looked way worse. And it looked like it was running in a game engine. There were textures that just looked like they, not necessarily low resolution, but their shader complexity was very simple. Like they didn't receive complex environmental lighting. So it was really odd. And a lot of the story of Death Island was characters standing around just talking, and it was odd. It was so odd because Leon is the only voice actor that I recognize. So all of the characters, starting in like, they always look odd. But especially in Death Island, none of the characters look like the characters that they're supposed to be representing, except Jill. Jill looks like the Jill you would recognize from Remake, but all of the characters, their faces are so off-model that I've tried to like Stockholm Syndrome myself into accepting, okay, this is what the characters look like now. And I could not force my brain to accept that these were the Resident Evil characters. Claire and Chris especially do not resemble anything like what they've looked like in the past, and their voices are so different. So it's problematic when your audience who really cares about the brand feels so disconnected by the product. I really want to like the Resident Evil movies. I want to enjoy them. And I do enjoy them, but they're terrible. They're really awful. The stories are exactly the same. They're very dull, but the action is so cool. And what I enjoyed most about Death Island was watching these characters who really are not that interesting. As characters, they're very boring. But I want to see these characters run around and shoot zombies and, bioweapons. And that's where Death Island really shines. It looks like the cheapest thing that you've ever seen when the characters are standing around talking. But when it comes to the action scenes, you can tell this is where they spent their time, this is where they spent their budget. So I feel this was a situation where they were very thoughtful in how they spent their resources, because the action scenes, oh, they're fantastic. And they make these Resident Evil movies worth watching. They make Death Island worth watching. The action in Vendetta is much more boring. And again, Vendetta is the movie that comes before Death Island. And it was for some reason, it's like this chick that's fighting Leon, and then like a dude who's fighting Leon. And there's a writing mistake that they make often in the Resident Evil CGI movies, and that is some outsider having too much competence. I would call it foreign overcompetence, where we know these characters, we've spent time with these characters like Leon and Chris. We've been through multiple zombie invasions and all this stuff and outbreaks, and so in our minds, these characters should be the most competent. These characters are the most battle ready, because firsthand, we have been there with these characters as they killed thousands of monsters. And you're going to tell me some random dude in a business suit who has had Taekwondo training can come in and kick Leon's butt? Are you serious right now? And that's the mistake that they make in these Resident Evil movies, is that keeps happening. Is some random dude, some random chick in a business suit comes in and beats up these characters that we know these are the most competent people in the world. So why does some foreigner who's never fought a BOW, how come they get to be more competent than our heroes? And it's irritating. It's frustrating for the audience to see that, and it just pisses off the audience in a way that you do not want. And so there's an unpleasantness to the Resident Evil CGI movies because of that, and it's irritating. For me as a Resident Evil fan, when I see that happen, it's like, oh, give me a break. You cannot tell me that that chick in a business suit is gonna beat Leon. There's no way. But it keeps happening again and again and again. But what is so cool about Death Island, it's by far the best because we have the most amount of zombie fighting. There's a bunch of zombies, and what's so cool is we get to see so many of our favorite Resident Evil characters. We get to see Chris, Claire, Jill, and Leon kicking so much butt. There's zombies everywhere, and we get to see them fighting zombies, and that's all I want. That is all I want out of these movies, and we get it, and we get heaps of it. I don't want to spoil anything because I feel that this movie is worth watching. If you are a fan of the Resident Evil games and you haven't seen this, absolutely watch it because it's so fun just for the fight scenes. If you view the dialogue and the story as an homage to the clunkiness and the awkwardness of early Resident Evil, then it absolutely works. I was disappointed because they sidelined Rebecca again. Come on, what do the writers have against Rebecca? Have they seen Resident Evil 0? Look, I'm a huge Resident Evil 0 fan. I know that people really dislike that game. I'm gonna say it's my second favorite in the series after Resident Evil 2. But Rebecca gets to do a little bit of action at the end of the movie. But I wanted to see Rebecca throwing hands, doing the fisticuffs with the zombies, and we didn't really get that. But I think for what the movie is, there's so much zombie fighting in this. There's so much BOW fighting, bioweapons that we didn't really get in the other CGI movies. There was less of it. This one was totally worth it, but it is so awkward. It's such a weird movie. And unfortunately, they gave Jill girl boss energy, and she had this attitude of, I don't need no man, which was very unpleasant. they treat every character like a block of wood in this. Every character is kind of just a parody of themselves. And Chris, they pushed it too far into this sulking, I'm gonna punch some BOWs, we need to take this job seriously. They went too far. The writers for these movies do not know what to do with these characters. But at least they didn't ruin Leon like they did in Vendetta, the previous movie. But that's a whole other story. Anyway, I don't know. Do you enjoy Resident Evil? Have you seen this movie? Let me know if you also enjoy Zero, because I would like to hear from people who actually enjoyed Zero. It's my second favorite one. I just love the vibe of it. I love the two character switching system. I really like Billy because he's very easy to cosplay as. I have a shirt, and I have jeans, and I have a leather belt, so I can cosplay as Billy pretty easily. Anyway, thanks for watching. Take care, everyone. I'll see you around. Hey, if you liked the music that was playing in this video, that's music that I've created. You can buy it on the Unity Asset Store to use in your games or videos, but put the link to my Patreon page in there. All the paid Patreon supporters can download this music pack for free, and you can use that as royalty-free music in your games and videos and other projects. Okay, thanks everyone. Take care.